we're going to get started. When we get the thumbs up, we have the thumbs up. All right. Well, welcome to Financing Your Future. Week 11 bajillion, I feel like. I feel like we hang out all the time now, which is so much fun. Today we're going to talk a little bit about choosing the right investments in terms of smart saving for college. So last time we met at Oakland University, and we talked a little bit about kind of part one of this topic of choosing the right investments. So today we're going to kind of talk about a little bit, some of those things a little bit more in detail. And we're going to try and kind of answer these questions. So do you have an idea of how much you need to save for college? I know we've talked a lot about like what the costs are and things like that. Do you know how much money you need to save? Do you know how much it costs? Do you know how the many different tax advantaged ways to save for college? So I know like we've talked about each of those briefly, but today I'm hoping to give you a little bit more detail of that information. And then we're going to play a little team game at the end. So there are definitely costs to consider besides just tuition when you're attending college, right? So you have to pay for tuition to attend the classes there. If you're going to live there, you also need to pay for room and board. If you're going to live off campus or even at home with parents, sometimes that's going to cost you additional money. So if you decide to live at home with mom and dad, they may not charge you rent. They may charge you a little bit. They may tell you that you need to start contributing to the groceries or to the utilities in the household as part of how to kind of learn how to manage all that fun stuff when you're older. Definitely if you get an off-campus apartment, you're going to have to pay for housing, groceries, utilities, transportation, things like that. You'll also need to pay for your books when you're in college. How many of you pay for your books right now in high school? Nobody, right? They just give them to you. They either let you use them for free or maybe they charge you a deposit, and then when you return it, you get the deposit back or something like that. But in college, you have to pay for books. And you can sell them back at the end of the semester, but you usually don't get nearly as much money for them as you paid for it. And there's new programs out where you can rent the books from an online program or something like that. You can download the books to an e-reader, so like a Kindle or a Nook or an iPad or something like that. And so some of those are less expensive. There's also transportation costs that you need to consider, especially if you are living on campus but you have an off-campus job. You need to have money to be able to get to that job. If you're living off campus, you need to have money to be able to get to and from school to make sure that you're not wasting your money on tuition and you're attending all your classes. And then there's kind of those miscellaneous living expenses. So how many people got up and washed their hair this morning, took a shower, brushed their teeth, put on clean clothes, or pajamas in this case, and used hair products or something like that? All of that costs a certain amount of money. So you had to buy your toiletry items, your toothpaste and your toothbrush, your hair conditioner, your shampoo, your soap. You had to pay for detergent to wash the clothes that you put on or the pajamas that you put on. The washer and dryer, all that kind of stuff costs money, right? So we want to make sure when we're at the colleges that we're giving you enough financial aid to cover all the expenses that you might encounter while you're attending that school to kind of help support you attend college. So in terms of how much money you need to save, this is a chart that kind of illustrates how much 4 years of college would cost. So all of those things that we just talked about, all of those costs, they're going to kind of estimate how much you need to save for 4 years of those costs. So if your parent has a child right now, they've had a child in the last year, and they're 1 year old. When that kid gets to college, it's going to cost about $450,000 for 4 years of college for them. So that includes tuition, books, room and board, miscellaneous, and travel expenses. Anybody 16? All right, so you 16-year-olds. You're going to be looking at probably a little over like maybe $220,000 for all 4 years by the time you get to college. Okay? Anybody 18? 17? 15? 15? All right. Well, how old are you guys? Jeez. So 15, you're probably looking at about $225,000 by the time you get to college for all 4 years. So how are you going to pay for that? Loans. All right. What was it? Grants. Scholarships. Parents. How are your parents going to pay for it, though? They have jobs. So that's part of what this class is all about, is to avoid loans as much as possible, because while a lot of people need loans to attend college, mostly they need loans because they didn't think they would need to save as much money as they do for college, or they weren't able to save that much. And if you start early, like at your age now, start setting aside money for when you're going to buy a house, the first car that you're going to buy, all of the expenses that you'll have associated when you get married, if you get married, and have kids and things like that. If you start thinking about that stuff now, you're going to be in a much better position to pay for your children's college education. So that's what we're talking about here when we're talking about investing and making sure that you're setting goals short-term, mid-term, and long-term, so that you can decide, how am I going to pay for those? Because your parents don't have just like buckets of money sitting somewhere to pay for you to do something. That's money that they're earning from a job, and that they have to make sure that they pay for your house, your groceries, your transportation places. They have to pay for all this stuff. And so they might only have a couple of $1,000s a year to put toward a saving for something like college in the future. So it's definitely a good thing to start thinking about it now. And scholarships. Grants. Grants are kind of a little bit out of your control because they're need-based. But scholarships, when you're juniors in high school, start applying for those private scholarships so that you can pay for that college when you get there and not have to take out loans and things like that. So you'll notice that the general trend is the younger that the child is right now, the more money they're going to have to pay for 4 years of college in the future. And that's because, as we learned last week, college costs increase about 5% or a little bit less every year. And that's due to different funding and different demands of what needs to be done at the school and things like that. So if you're going to, for example, save some money and you're going to put some money into an investment, like we've talked about Coverdell accounts or MET or something like that, that money is going to compound, and that's going to get you kind of the best deal for the best bang for your buck, right? Because you're going to put in a little bit of money, and then this example is 6% annual rate of return. And so they give you multiples of the amount that you put in, right? So it grows over time. So you'll notice that the trend of how your money compounds kind of mimics how much money you're going to need in the future for someone who's going to college or really kind of attaining any goal that needs a financial investment. So a lot of parents ask this, and it's good for you to know, how is saving and investing going to affect your eligibility for financial aid? I'm assuming that everybody's going to apply for financial aid, because why not get free money like grants and scholarships and things like that instead of using your own money to pay? So that's part of how you're not, that $200,000 that you might have to save for college, half of that could come from financial aid. It could come from grants and scholarships that you get. So then really you only need to save $100,000. Well, if your parents bought you a MET, and by the time you get to college, it's going to be worth $75,000, then really all you need to look into saving is $25,000 out of that $200,000 estimate. Yeah?
What's a MET?
MET is Michigan Education Trust, and it is a college savings plan that you can deposit money into every year, and they invest it for you, and it makes money so that it grows, so that when you go to college, you're able to pay for the tuition and other expenses. Yeah?
What's the risk with the MET?
Risk with the Met, it depends on what they're investing in.
Would you know what they're investing in? Like, do they tell you what they're investing in?
Yeah, I think you can choose.
Oh.
Yeah.
Have you heard of the TIP program? I received papers
Yep.
about that.
Yep, TIP is a program through the state of Michigan. Yeah, it is, but it's not an investment or anything like that. It's a state-funded program. I saw a hand in the back. Yeah.
For the Met, like, what schools does it go towards?
You can use it at any school.
Okay.
Not just in Michigan.
There are different, well, there's two different Michigan programs, and there are different things. I'll go over a little bit at the end. There's a comparison chart of the different programs, so we'll be able to see kind of what those are. So the impact of saving and investing on your financial aid kind of depends. So if your parents own the money, the account that you have, or if you own the account that you have, it has a different impact on your eligibility for federal aid. So for example, savings in a parent's name can reduce the student's federal financial aid eligibility by at most 5.64%. So it could be less than that, but at most, that's how much their savings is going to affect your financial aid eligibility through filling out the FAFSA and things like that. If it's saved in your name, however, then it could reduce your eligibility by up to 20%. So having you as the owner of, giant amounts of money and things like that isn't always beneficial. The 529 accounts, so those are the MET and the MESP or some other college savings program, owned by the child or set up as a custodial account for students, are treated at the lower 5.64. So the MET and the MESPs are kind of an exception to that. So even though maybe your grandparent or your parent or you are the owner of the account or the custodian of the account, it still doesn't affect your financial aid as much as having something like in your savings account would.
Do bonds, if you have bonds in your child's name, like E-bonds, I-bonds, do those affect financial aid?
We're going to go over those in a little bit, but it depends on who owns them. So there's also benefits for service members in the military or for veterans of service. There's something called the Post-9/11 GI Bill, and it pays for education and housing costs for service members, active service members, and veterans who served at least 90 days of service after September 11th, 2001. So that at times is rare, having something that pays for the education costs and the housing. So that's definitely a benefit. One of the nuances of this bill is that eligible veterans can claim benefits for up to 15 years after leaving the military. So a lot of times something will have a limit of like only being available for 4 years. So they're trying to make sure that you're getting through college quickly. There's different programs that it will pay for, which is also unique. Sometimes it will only pay for an undergraduate degree. But the actual program pays for undergraduate, graduate, on-the-job training, apprenticeship programs, flight schools, and other non-degree seeking programs. So federal aid, for example, you have to be working toward a degree. And there are very limited number of certificates that will allow you to get federal aid for that particular program. But this one will allow you to seek out a certificate or something that's not a degree seeking program. So that when you're finished with it, you don't get a degree, you get a certificate saying that you finished something. There's also tuition and fee reimbursement. All in-state tuition and fee charges are reimbursed at public institutions, so 100% of them. For private and foreign institutions, there's a benefit cap, so they'll only pay for a certain percentage of those. It gives a stipend for books and supplies and a monthly housing allowance as well. And it gives you the ability to transfer any unused education benefits to your spouse or to your children. So if this applies to your parent and they are able to then transfer those benefits to you, which is sometimes kind of unusual. So that's definitely one of those advantages of using that kind of alternative. So some of the tax-advantaged alternatives that we've been looking at are 529 plans, so the prepaid tuition plans and the college saving plans, Coverdell education savings accounts, UGMA and UTMA accounts, and then the savings bonds. So the 529 plans, the contributions to that can vary. Some funds require that you pay a certain amount per year or per month. Some of them have caps on how much you can pay. These are only limited by the maximum and minimum contribution limits set by the plan. So in most states, because remember every state has a plan like this, ours is called MESP and MET. The maximum amount that you can contribute for one person, one beneficiary, exceeds $250,000. So most of you had under $250,000, I think, for how much you would need to save for 4 years of college. So that could pay for all 4 years of college. So does everybody know what a beneficiary is? What's a beneficiary?
Like a person who inherits money that's passed down by another person.
Okay, it could be somebody that inherits something. So essentially it's someone that receives the benefit of whatever program we're referring to. The number of investment options varies from account to an account, but there's a lot more investment options than something where you are limited to the type of investment or the amount of money and things like that. So you have a little bit more freedom with these types of accounts. There's common fees that you can occur, such as enrollment fees, an annual maintenance fee, a sales charge, which is called a front-end sales load, deferred sales charge, administration or management fees, and underlying fund expenses. So when you get some of these accounts and you're looking into what kind of investment is best for you in order to be able to set up your college savings plan and things like that, these are some of the things that you need to be aware of, all the different fees that they could be charged. Because remember last week, one of the tips was, or not last week, the week before when we last met, one of the tips was be aware of the fees. If they don't have a published document with the fees that they charge, or if you're not fully aware and able to ask questions about it, then that's not going to be a good investment for you. There's also a Coverdell education savings account. These are things where you can buy and sell your investments, just trade however you wish, except for investing in life insurance contracts. That's their only limit on those. You can usually set them up at any brokerage firm, mutual fund company, or other financial institution. It just depends on where you're comfortable going. So some things are limited and some things are able to be used or able to be set up anywhere. The contributions are not deductible, but earnings are tax deferred, and withdrawals that are used for qualified education expenses are tax-free. So that's an important benefit because your parents will definitely want to know this, and you will want to know if you have to pay tax on any of this money, if you have to report it in any way as income or pay anything on it now or later. There's also tax-free withdrawals to pay for private elementary and high school expenses, as well as post-secondary school expenses. This is the only investment where you can use it specifically to pay for high school and elementary schools. Most of them are focusing on college expenses. You are limited to contributing $2,000 per year. But just to give you an idea of how much that means, when you invest $2,000 per year, if you invest it in an account that has that 6% annual rate of return, then by the time you get to college, that's going to be like $80,000 over 18 years. So that's definitely something that is worth looking into with the compounding rates. There's also custodial accounts. These are going to be your UGMA and your UTMA accounts, right? So UGMA accounts are where, I'm going to wait till the next slide to explain that to you so you can actually see it. But to give you an example, in 2013, they have a tax benefit for that. So if they're a full-time student or they're younger than 19, the first $950 is tax-free, so you don't have to pay taxes on that first $950. The next $950 is taxed at the child's federal tax rate, which is different than what your parents are taxed at. And then any earnings over the $1,900 are taxed at the custodian's federal tax rate. So they're not paying nearly as much in taxes if it were just like a straight up income or savings account information. So savings bonds are a safe investment. So if you're not looking to do a lot of risk, if you're not really interested in fluctuating markets, or it's maybe a shorter term goal, like it's coming up pretty quickly, then you can do savings bonds. They're backed by the United States government. The interest from the bond is tax-free if you use it for higher education expenses. There are income limits that apply. So depending on the amount of income that you have per year, that determines how much, if any, or what type of bonds you can get. I know that's kind of hard to see, but I have some booklets that you can take with you today if you want, and there's going to be a link to it online. But this is a comparison chart between all of the savings plan. So ask me your question again about the education savings plan. I think you asked if you can use it in different states, right?
Yeah.
All right, so oh, it doesn't have it on this one. I thought it did. That was the other comparison chart that we went over earlier this year. Each state has their own, and you can use it in different states, but it might not cover the same amount that it would cover at your in-state school. Okay? There's also college tax credits. So when you're filing your tax return, there are things that you can take a credit on for when you complete your taxes every year so that you can reduce the amount of taxes that you're paying. There's the American Opportunity Credit. This credit reduces the amount of income tax that you have to pay overall. It's available for all 4 years of college and can be used for purchases like course materials, books, tuition, and any fees that the college charges to you. There is a maximum credit of $2,500 per student, so you can claim multiple students in the household if you wish. If you have that many students, or you can just claim one. But each student has a maximum credit of $2,500. The student has to be pursuing a degree. So remember we talked about degree-seeking programs and how you have to end up with a college degree at the end of that. That's what this is for. If you're going to school for a certificate or for things like professional development just for the fun of taking a class, then you can't claim that credit. You have to be going at least half-time and not have a felony drug conviction. Then there's income limits to that as well. So depending on the amount of income that you have, you may or may not be able to use the credit on your tax return. The second one is a lifetime learning credit, and that allows you to claim up to 20% of the first $10,000 paid for college tuition and fees for a maximum credit of $2,000 per tax return. So this is different than the previous tax credit, because the previous tax credit, you could claim it for multiple students in the household. But for this one, you can only claim it once. So it's only one credit per tax return. There's no limit, though, on the number of years you can claim the credit, which is also different from the previous credit. And this one can be used for undergraduate and graduate courses, for tuition and fees when the student attends at least half-time. And this one also has income limits. So here's a list of resources for you. I especially want to highlight the one at the top, the finra.org/college_calc. That is going to provide you with a calculator to determine how much money you need to save for college, so that you can kind of review the information you've received over this course and decide kind of what are the best options for you given how far away or how close college is for you. Yeah, absolutely. This presentation is also going to be online, so if you want to review the slides at any point, you're welcome to do that. The link to this booklet that we have here has all of the information that we talked about in a lot more detail as well. So if you want to take this, you are welcome to do that. If we run out of copies, then you'll be able to get it from the Troy Library website. So I'll put them up here for you to take if you want.